Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome to Once Upon a Time in Texas with episode number 76 titled Panhandle Towns and Funny Song Names. Let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm your host, Michael Mitchell. A couple of random things. I want to give a shout out. We stopped, as I said last week, on our way to Eagle Nest to go riding ATVs in Red River, New Mexico last week. We stayed the night in Channing, Texas, and there's not anywhere that I could see to have breakfast in Channing, so we moseyed on up the road to Dalhart. My oldest daughter, Lorelei, finds a place called Cattleman's Stockyard Cafe, which was literally a cafe inside the stockyards in Dalhart. And want to give a shout out to our waitress. I apologize if she hears this. I don't remember her name, but it occurred to me when Lorelei ordered biscuits and gravy that we were making biscuits and gravy for breakfast for the group we were riding with one morning, and we forgot the damn gravy. And as soon as she set the plate down in front of, daughter number one, I went, damn it. And everybody stops and looks at me, and I said, I forgot the gravy at home, like a couple hundred miles away. And so the waitress was so nice, she went out and dug out a big package of gravy mix and gave it to us and said, well, that way you don't have to stop and buy any because there ain't many places between here and where you're going. And so, yeah, that was super nice, and the breakfast was amazing. Daughter number two had a giant plate of eggs and 9 different kinds of meat. And, my son had pancakes. I had a breakfast burrito that was great and a little pancake. And then my wife had a pancake or something. I don't remember. But anyway, it was all good. And they were super nice to talk to. It was just amazing. Then we get to New Mexico. And, it was just terrible. Here it was so nice and warm and sweaty here at home. And we get out there and it's just awful. 55s in the morning, low 80s during, the height of the day. And, it just felt terrible to suffer like that, knowing that everybody at home was so warm and cozy in their houses and outside. But you know what? We fell on that sword for the good of humanity and enjoyed ourselves anyway. I'm going to give another shout out. We were on our way home, and my father's trailer, he's got an ATV trailer. I've got a deck over, so I had 5 ATVs on my trailer. And Dad's trailer hauls, it's like a 16-foot flatbed kind of. It's specially built for ATVs, but they sit sideways on the trailer, and we had a bearing that blew out. It was pretty amazing. I mean, smoke came out. I saw it out of my rearview mirror because I was in the lead. My cousin was in the truck behind with my mom and a friend of ours, Diane, and they were like, oh my God, something bad happened. And so we pulled off, and sure enough, a bearing had gone out. The wheel was about to fall off, and it would have been a very bad day. And so we ended up jacking it up and pulling the wheel and tire off. And then we let it down, and it if you've got a 2-axle trailer, you can take one of the wheels off and you can kind of limp it down the road. And so we were 14 miles from Clarendon. It's 15 in the afternoon. We limp it down the road. We pull up in front of a CarQuest in Clarendon. CarQuest is if you don't know, it's an auto parts store. And they helped. They came out with a micrometer. They checked the axle. They found the right bearings. And then they're like, hey, we've got the shop in the back, because they're also an automotive shop, which is kind of cool. They do brakes, tires, mechanic work, all kinds of stuff. They said, pull it around. It's 5 o'clock. We're supposed to be helping, or we're supposed to be closing, but, we're going to help y'all out. And so they ended up staying for like an extra, hour and 15 minutes. and helped us get our trailer back together. Dad and another friend of ours, Mike Jackson, they did the majority of the work, but the guys kept bringing tools out, checking on us. It was just amazing. So big shout out to CarQuest in Clarendon, Texas. You guys are awesome, and I hope you guys enjoyed lunch on us, because we gave them some money and said thank you, and said have lunch on us and do it right. Another big note going on Monday of this week, so that would have been Monday, July 22nd, 2024, I officially hit 5,000 downloads of Once Upon a Time in Texas. That's huge for me. Like, I never really thought that it would go that big, but it has, and that ends up being about 66 downloads per episode. So you know what? I'm not a huge podcast, but for those of y'all that are listening faithfully, and those that give me feedback, especially guys like Michael Battolino, who's a buddy of mine and city councilor here in Wichita Falls, appreciate the support for my little old podcast and, the stuff that I just put out on the old interwebs. Appreciate that. And last thing going on today, I am presenting to the Burke Rotary Club, the Burke Burnett Rotary Club. We shorten it up to Burke for those of y'all that don't know. So, as a lot of you guys know, I did take over as Rotary Club president for the Wichita Falls Southwest Rotary Club. I have a friend by the name of Kevin Seeger who is in the Burke Burnett Rotary Club where he grew up. Super cool guy. Some sort of, nuclear physicist, literal rocket scientist, and super cool guy. I always enjoy being around Kevin, and he said, hey, I'm the program chair, and I want you to come out and speak. And I said, well, what the hell am I going to come out and speak about that you guys don't already know? And he said, scouting, Girls and Scouts, and the name change. We want to know. And I said, okay. And so I've got a whole, not script, but outline of things I'm going to talk about. And, Boy Scouts of America is changing their name to Scouting America. We've allowed girls to join the program, as I've mentioned several times. Daughter number one, we're currently working on her Eagle Scout project. It's being built as we speak, and so she'll be an Eagle Scout by the end of the year. Daughter number two is a Star Scout, so she'll be probably life this fall, and we'll be working on her Eagle Scout in 2025. And then my son, who's 12, is also a Star Scout. He'll probably be life by the springtime. I'm trying to slow him down a little bit, but he gets the benefit of, with parents that are assistant scoutmasters in both a boys troop and a girls troop, he ends up, going with us to a lot of campouts and stuff. So he's way ahead. So anyway, let's jump into this podcast this week. Have you ever thought about some of the largest ranches in Texas and where they came from? Maybe some of the town or place names. I don't know if you guys do this, but do you guys think about that stuff? And then do you look it up and go, well, where the heck did this name come from? Or what is this? And try to find out some history and find out what, where they got that name. How about the song Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas? I remember coming through Dumas, Texas, and it said, original home of the Ding Dong Daddy. And I was like, what? But then also, once we got to looking for that, we found that there is actually a town in Texas called Ding Dong, Texas. Yeah. No shit, guys. So let's take a look at a few of these places. I'm going to go through a little bit of history, learn y'all a little something. Of course, as always, before I do, I want to thank our sponsors. That is me and Victory Home Loans. So guys, I know there are tons of people moving to Texas and Oklahoma, where I am licensed as a mortgage loan originator. I do work for and with Victory Home Loans, which is an amazing company. We are licensed in 16 or 17 states now. We've got about 24 lenders that we work with. Long and the short of it, me as a mortgage loan originator, my job is to go out and search for the best mortgage deal for you if and when you're looking to buy a home. And so I'm licensed in Texas and Oklahoma, but if you are somebody who's looking to move to Texas and Oklahoma, give me a holler. Give me a shout. Would love to help you out. If you know somebody that's moving somewhere else, tell them to give me a shout. Even though I may not be licensed in their state, I can help hook them up with one of my teammates through Victory Home Loans and really make some stuff happen for you. We are a lot better than working with just your big box bank because we care. We're going to get you the best deal. Big box banks have one lender, one line that they can use, and I've got over 20. So let's go. Remember, when you work with me, I sell dreams, not mortgages. I do what I can to make it happen. So where did this week's idea come from? Well, as you can imagine, we were driving through the Texas Panhandle. If you listened to last week's podcast, you heard that I stayed in Channing, Texas, which was kind of the headquarters of the XIT Ranch for a while. And as we do when my family and I are driving, we did the whole I wonder thing and started up looking up history and such. And the Panhandle of Texas really has a lot of history, but we don't really focus on it a lot, I guess. I guess because the Panhandle of Texas is kind of newer history versus, the old history. I don't know. I don't even know how to say it. But you know what? Doesn't matter. So let's jump into this. Let's learn y'all a little something. Ding Dong, Texas. Okay. So full disclosure, this is not in the Panhandle. It ain't nowhere close to the Panhandle. Ding Dong, Texas actually lies 500 miles southwest of Dumas, Texas, which is kind of the center of the Panhandle. Ding Dong, Texas is actually kind of near the center of Texas, kind of close to Austin. But I have heard people assume that the song Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas has actually been sung about Ding Dong, Texas, since the words ding dong are part of the name. And it's fun to say. So I'm going to say ding dong one more time to make sure that I could say it plenty of times. And let's be honest. Ding Dong is a funny town name, so I decided to add it to the podcast, even though it's not in the Panhandle. And you know what? It's my podcast. I do what I want. But where did this come from? Like, what's the idea? Well, in the early 1930s, a man named Zulus, talk about interesting names, Z-U-L-I-S, Zulus Bell, and his nephew Bert Bell operated a country store along the Lampasas River in central Texas in an area that is known as McBride's Crossing. They hired an artist named C.C. Hoover to make a sign for their lovely store. The finished sign had two bells on it with the name Zulus on one and Bert on the other, since their last name was Bell. And the bells were reported to have been requested by Dallas newspaper columnist Frank X. Tolbert. And then there were actual bells that were brought into town that weighed about $200 or 200 pounds each and were brought to the community via the local railway in 1962. So these were added, and they were given to the mayor of the community by the name of Charlie Hold by two of the railroad's vice presidents. Hold, the mayor at the time, had actually taken over the Bells store in 1950. And so the bells were brought in to honor the original bells that had started the store, hence the name, and the play on words with the bells. And so in addition to the bells, Hoover lettered the words ding dong on the original sign, and as the community grew around the country store, people quit calling it McBride's Crossing and just started calling it Ding Dong. And now we have Ding Dong, Texas. So how about that? Would you like to live in a place called Ding Dong? I don't know. Be kind of fun. All right, let's go to Dumas. My father pronounces it Dumbass, and I think that's kind of rude, and Mom and I have told him to cut it out, but he does it anyway because my dad's 70 years old and a doctor, and he does whatever he wants to, and he doesn't really care what Mom and I think. So anyway, Dumas, D-U-M-A-S, is the actual pronunciation of the town. This is where the song Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas actually came from. The song I'm a Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas is a song written and sung by a cat named Phil Baxter, accompanied by another guy named Phil Harris and his orchestra in 1928, so almost 100 years ago. It was originally named after the town of Dumas, Texas. The radio station in Dumas is KDDD-FM and is named after the song. Hence, the 3 Ds stand for Ding Dong Daddy. Isn't that kind of cool? So Dumas, a little bit of history on the town. It's a city and a county seat in Moore County, Texas, way up in the Panhandle. Has a population of about 14,500 people, so a pretty good-sized town. It's about 40 miles north of Amarillo. It was named for its founder, Louis Dumas, which kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Louis Dumas. Dumas Avenue is the main thoroughfare, which is also U.S. Highways 87 and 287, which 287 runs for a long way down to Dallas-Fort Worth area, all the way up through Wichita Falls, Amarillo, cuts north and goes up through Dumas and goes clear up into Colorado. The Dumas government claims, with documentation, that the song I'm a Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas was written about the city. Again, it was composed in the late 1920s, who was a native Texan who did actually live for a time in Dumas. However, the song has also sometimes been claimed by Dumas, Arkansas, which is in southeastern Arkansas. They have claimed sometimes that it's about their fair town, and in my roughly 45 seconds of research, they're wrong. So, sorry, Dumas, Arkansas. If I ever go through there, don't throw rotten eggs and stuff at me. Sorry. I just did a little bit of research, and apparently Dumas, Texas lays the claim because, it's Texas and we're awesome. So, there you go. And it's not a bad song. I'm a Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas. It's got a ring to it. So let's talk about another town, fair town out in the Panhandle that I moseyed through. Dalhart, Texas, founded in 1901, so 123 years old this year. Dalhart is named for its location on the border of Dallam and Hartley counties, and so its name is actually a piece of each of those counties. So Dal for Dallam, Hart for Hartley. There you go. Dalhart. It was founded at the site of a railroad junction, as many towns in the West were, which heavily contributed to its early growth. Dalhart was in the center of the Dust Bowl. If you guys have not read about the Dust Bowl, holy smokes, that's a pretty interesting time in history. The Grapes of Wrath, that movie and play and book are all about that. But anyway, Dalhart was in the big fat middle of it. It was adversely affected by a long period of drought and dust storms during the Great Depression in the 1930s. And here, a guy named Tex Thornton operated on the now debunked concussion theory, coaxed today's inflation equivalent of about $1 million from locals on claims that he could fire rocket-powered explosive into clouds and cause rain. Now, this is interesting. The concussion theory came from Civil War time, to where people got to noticing that after big battles, and in history, after big battles, where there were explosives, people found that rain would come a lot of times not long after, and the idea was that it was the concussion of the cannonballs, fireworks, explosives, whatever going off. And so he actually went out and claimed that, and it didn't work, unfortunately. But a lot of good research came out of it. And speaking of great books, there's a great one about the Dust Bowl that I read years ago called The Worst Hard Times. I remember reading a lot of it, and it's just cool history because, growing up and partly in Oklahoma and mostly in North Texas, you hear a lot about the Dust Bowl. And there were still people around when I was a kid that would talk about the Dust Bowl and what it was like. Not only being in the Great Depression, a lot of these folks were poor farmers, and agricultural folks anyway. But then you throw the Dust Bowl on top of that, and really Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kansas were all hit really hard. So The Worst Hard Times is the name of the book. But one thing I did remember reading was a little bit about the Last Man Club being started in Dalhart, Texas. And so the Last Man Club was a mutual support group for farmers and ranchers that chose to stay in the southern plains of Texas, or in the Panhandle Plains. So in spite of the devastation caused by the Dust Bowl disaster of the 1930s, this was really kind of the first American dream. So a guy named John McCarty was an editor of the Dalhart Texan, and he formed the Last Man Club in Dalhart, Texas, as a mutual support group for farmers and ranchers that chose to stay in the drought-swept Great Plains, or as he called it, grab a root and growl. So declaring that the plains were the best damn country God's son ever shone upon, McCarty published a pledge in the newspaper he worked for, stating that he would stay until everyone else was gone, and he dared others to join him. He got the idea for starting the Last Man Club when he read about a similar club that was started by a Civil War unit. Members had to swear to be the last man to leave the Dust Bowl swept area. The exact pledge words were, and I quote, "In the absence of an act of God, serious family injury, or some other emergency, I pledge to stay here as the last man and to do everything I can to help other last men remain in this country. We promise to stay here till hell freezes over or skate out on the ice." End quote. My gosh, you talk about grit and moxie. Holy crap. McCarty worked to instill a sense of pride in the region in members of his club. He actually celebrated dust storms, saying that the heroism of locals was proved through their determination to remain in the Great Plains. How cool is that? I mean, talk about turning a negative into a positive. I mean, I'm sure there were lots of folks going, oh my gosh, another dust storm. And just like Sergeant Dan in Forrest Gump, he's giving the finger saying, yay, another dust storm, bring it on. I just love that. Let's slip on over to another interesting town that I passed through on the way out to New Mexico, which is neither new nor Mexico, but an interesting place nonetheless. A little town called Texline. I'll give you guys two guesses on what Texline is named after, but I'll bet you only need one. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyway. Texline is a town in northwestern Dallam County. Population's about 450, and it's named for its, y'all ready? This may surprise some of y'all, for its location on the New Mexico-Texas state line. Isn't that unique? It also sits on Highway 87, which continues towards or through from Dalhart through to Clayton, New Mexico. That's the way I was going. So for years, there has been this simmering dispute over whether Texline is lawfully part of Texas or New Mexico. I know, disputes abound when it comes to boundaries. There's still a pissing contest between Texas and Oklahoma over who owns the Red River. and where that boundary line actually is. So anyway, the straight north-south border between Texas and New Mexico was originally defined as the 103rd meridian, but the 1859 survey that was supposed to mark the boundary mistakenly set the border between 2.5 and 3 3/4 miles too far west of that line. They did not account for declination. I read about that before. So the survey error resulted in the current towns of Texline, Farwell, Bledsoe, Bronco, and part of Glen Rio being within the state of Texas. New Mexico's short border with Oklahoma, in contrast, was correctly surveyed on the meridian by a group that later surveyed it. New Mexico's draft constitution in 1910 stated that the border is on the 103rd meridian as intended. The disputed strip, which is hundreds of miles long, includes parts of valuable oil fields of the Permian Basin. A bill was passed in the New Mexico Senate to fund and file a lawsuit in the United States Supreme Court to recover that strip from Texas, but it did not become law. Today, land in the strip is included in Texas land surveys, and the land and towns for all purposes are taxed and governed by the great state of Texas. Pretty much, we gave the finger to New Mexico. But we like going out there in the summertime because it's hot here and not there. So, as we're out there, I told you all a little bit about the XIT Ranch and seeing the headquarters last week, and I did a little more digging, and I want to give y'all a little bit of history on it for those of y'all that don't know. This is really, really cool. So the XIT Ranch was the big fat majority of the Panhandle of Texas. It was a cattle ranch in the Panhandle and operated from 1885 to 1912, so just under 30 years, I guess. Yeah. So comprising over 3 million acres. Guys, that is million acres of land. It ran for 200 miles along the border with New Mexico and varied in width from 20 to 30 miles wide. This massive ranch stretched through 10 counties in Texas and at its peak regularly handled 150,000 head of cattle. So the brand XIT was chosen for its difficulty to alter with a running brand, as they called it, which kind of thwarted their cattle from being rustled. The XIT Ranch was located on the western edge of the Texas Panhandle, like I said. This was anciently the territory of the Querecho Indians and the Tayas. In 1879, the 16th Texas legislature appropriated 3 million acres of land to finance a new state capital. That's right, folks. They had a shitload of land, and they decided to sell it because we needed a new Capitol building. By God, that's one of the most Texas things I've ever heard. We got a bunch of land. Nobody wants it, so let's sell it, see if we can make some money, build a Capitol. So in 1882, in a special legislative session, the 17th Texas legislature struck a bargain with Charles B. and John V. Farwell of Chicago, Illinois, under which a syndicate led by the Farwells with mostly British investors. Think about this. These are all people who had never seen Texas probably ever and had for damn sure probably not been to the Panhandle of Texas. They agreed to build a new Texas state capital in Austin and to accept 3 million acres of Panhandle land as payment. The ranch stretched across all or portions of the counties of Dallam, Hartley, Oldham, Deaf Smith, Palmer, Castro, Bailey, Lamb, Cochran, and Hockley County. The total expense for the Capitol building amounted to, now remember, this was back in the 1880s, so this was a boatload of money. Total expense amounted to $3,744,744,000 $630.60, of which the syndicate company paid $3,224,593.45. Long story short, they paid a little over $1 per acre. Yeah, think about that. I mean, seriously though, I hate to say it. I mean, even today, if I were offered 3 million acres at $1 an acre, I couldn't come up with that. I could just run around swinging my arms saying, ain't that cheap, ain't that cheap. So remember that line that we talked about with text line and how it was in dispute? Well, it was found to be off, I guess, when a guy named Babcock was assigned to inspect this new land that had been given to the syndicate in 1882. And he found that the line in John H. Clark's survey of 1859 that defined the 103rd meridian was off by about a half a mile. So you kind of go, a half a mile, big deal, Mike. Who cares? Well, let's talk about that. This may not seem like a huge deal, but hang on to your hats. The issue wasn't settled until John V. Farwell and President William Howard Taft. Think about that. This guy had the ear of the president. They passed a joint resolution in 1911 by Congress honoring the Clark Line of 1859. This action saved Texas a strip of land a half mile wide and 310 miles long. Does that really make like big numbers in your head? Probably not, because it didn't for me right off. But as I was writing this, I was like, you know what? Let's put some pen to paper and figure this out. So there's 160 acres in a half mile by half mile stretch of land. So if we bump that up to a half mile by 1 mile, that's 320 acres in a half mile by 1 mile stretch. Now, we multiply that by 310 because that's the length, right? So some quick, simple math, that comes up to 99,200 acres. So just shy of 100,000 acres. Pretty significant. You know, however, that would have only amounted to about 3.3% of the total XIT ranch commitment. But I mean, it's still cool though. Like, I mean, you think about it, that's 100,000 acres, you know. And to be frank, I would have been a little pissed about losing an extra 100,000 acres, you know, I guess. So the development of the ranch, I want to talk about this because there's some crazy numbers too. The development of the ranch has some crazy numbers. They maintained between 125,000 and 150,000 head of cattle. That ends up being about 20 acres per head of cows. They ran a 4-wire barbed wire fence on the majority of the property, and by 1886 they had 781 miles of fence, and by the mid-1890s they had reached 1,500 miles of fence, including cross fencing, which broke the entire ranch up into 94 separate pastures. They ran a telephone line in 1888 from the southern end of the ranch to the northern end of the ranch, which is about 300-ish miles. The northern end of the ranch had plenty of water, but the southern end didn't, so it needed wells. So 335 wells were drilled and windmills were set. And they also did 100 earthen dams to create ponds or tanks to hold water. Now think about this. This is all done over 100 years ago. All manual labor, all done by hand. Those are some crazy numbers. But I think I want to stop there right now. I've given y'all a little taste of the XIT Ranch, and I want to stop there because I think I'd like to do a podcast just on the XIT Ranch and a little more of its history later. So I'm gonna kind of pull the plug. We're a little over 30 minutes now, so I'm gonna stop there and I'll just say, what do you think? Let me know what other weird and off-the-wall interesting Texas history you'd like to think about. I would like to thank our sponsors again. That's me and Victory Home Loans. Keep in mind, if you know someone moving to Texas or Oklahoma, send them my way to themichaelmitchell.com, THE-michaelmitchell.com. Remember, I sell dreams, not mortgages. If you are interested in becoming a member of Rotary, kind of no matter where you are, shoot me a message. I'd love to chat with you about it. Rotary International is an amazing, amazing organization, and I'm very blessed to be with a good group of people. If you're interested in helping out scouts, whether it's here in Wichita Falls or in your local community, holler at me about that. I'd love to chat with you about that. And if you are here in Wichita Falls, specifically in my neighborhood, I'm also the chairman of the Wichita Falls Revitalization Committee, which is starting right here in my hood. Feel free and reach out. Would love to talk to you about that. Thank you all for tuning in to Once Upon a Time in Texas. As always, remember, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Y'all have a great week.